What is going on, all you Pokemon collecting maniacs out there? This is Ryan, the PikiPikaPapa, and when I'm trying to wrap my head around what is going on in this wild, crazy world of Pokemon collecting and investing that we all love, this is the video series that always comes to the forefront of my mind, and that's because we're going to be looking at some really cool data. So on this very first slide, we're going to be looking at the actual grading volume at PSA, SGC, CGC, and Beckett. We're going to look at them as a whole, and we're going to talk about them specifically in the TCG space. But then after this slide, we're going to double click down into PSA, because if you look at the graph on the left, right, those are the actual grading volumes for those four grading companies. You see PSA is way up there, and everybody is just not even playing for second place. They're just playing to get in the stadium, right? Like, they're not even on the same field as PSA right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at PSA specifically, and we're going to look at the most graded cards, the most graded sets, the most graded characters, gem rates, and on and on and on. And what that does is it paints this giant picture of kind of what's hot in the market, what people are having graded, you know, what cards are moving, what sets are super popular. And again, you know, when I'm trying to make investing and collecting decisions, it's always good to aggregate as much information as I can. And whenever I can get information like this, I just think it's really valuable. And we've seen over the past, you know, we've been doing this for well over a year now, we always walk away with some big nuggets and some big learning. So that's one of the reasons I get so excited about putting this video together for you. Now, I will say this video is a ton of work, and I don't mind doing it. I enjoy doing it. But the best way you can say thank you if you find value in it too is hitting that subscribe button if you haven't already. If you like what you see, give us a thumbs up, or if you have questions or comments, drop them down below. Those three small things go a long way in helping my small channel out, and I really appreciate it. So with that out of the way, let's start talking about what we saw last month. Now, if you remember, I was very excited in August because we had a huge spike, not just in PSA grading. PSA broke an all-time record for the number of cards that it graded as a whole in August, but it also had a really strong TCG month. And so I was, you know, we've had a rough year. 2024 has not been a great year in terms of grading volume for TCG cards at PSA. And you can say there's a bunch of different reasons for it. Sword and Shield was kind of dying down, right? Not a lot of people are ripping those booster boxes. And then you've got Scarlet and Violet, which we're just starting to get into some of the big sets of Scarlet and Violet. So there's a bunch of different reasons for that. But overall, I think grading activity is important to the hobby. I think it shows a lot of people are investing and spending the extra money to get the cards encapsulated because I think they think now they could have some upside, right? A raw card versus a graded card. Graded card carries more value. And also because they think that there's long-term price appreciation in graded cards. So when I see that the volume isn't particularly strong over the course of the year, it doesn't give me concern, but it's certainly worth talking about. Now, the other thing that's been really interesting to me over the last 6 months is look at that red line on the graph on the left, okay? Those are actual grading volumes at PSA, like I said. Look how inconsistent it's been. I mean, there have been wild swings. There have been big spikes and big drops and big spikes and big, I mean, not just big spikes, but I mean, we're talking about in alternate months, PSA has broken records for the most cards graded in a month in all time. It has just been insane to see these peaks and valleys. And as a business operator myself, that's not necessarily what you want to see. I mean, businesses don't move linearly, but you certainly don't want to see these huge peaks and huge valleys. It's just inconsistency is a hard way to drive throughput. It's a hard way to drive efficiency. So I don't know what's going on with PSA, but it's been very interesting to see. And again, that graph goes all the way back to January of 2022, and you can see that no point from January 22 till now have we seen such aggressive up and downs like we've seen over the last 6 months. And, you know, again, not a great TCG month for PSA last month. So if you look at the graph on the far right, you can see that the overall month-over-month TCG grading volume is actually down 24%, and it's actually down 28% year over year. Now, last year, in August is when they opened up that PSA grading facility. Actually, it was in July. In July of last year, they opened up the PSA grading facility over in Japan. So we saw a huge influx of TCG cards graded over there in Japan. So again, year over year, I expect it to be a little bit down, but month over month to be down 24%. Again, there's no noise in that data. That is just a much lower month than the previous month. So that gives me a little bit of a concern. Now, the graph in the middle, those are the grading volumes for SGC, CGC, and Beckett, right? We have to pull them out because PSA is so far and away above everybody else. And if you look, all three brands really had a down month overall. Total volume just did not do well last month for all of the brands. So at least it wasn't, you know, it looks like it's more global versus just concentrated to PSA. And then when you look on the chart there on the right at the overall TCG numbers, you see that everybody was pretty soft month over month from a TCG grading perspective. CGC was down 11% month over month. Beckett was down 15% month over month. Poor Beckett. I don't know what the heck they're going to do with Beckett grading, but look at that. I mean, they're at the very bottom blue line in that middle graph right there, and it has just been tough sledding for Beckett. I love Beckett. I have a lot of early ties to Beckett. I remember running the mailbox and getting the Beckett magazine back when I was a kid. So I have a lot of emotional ties to Beckett. I want them to figure it out, but they just continue to decline month over month. And if you look at it, they're down 15% month over month in TCG, and they're down 21% year over year. So CGC is actually up 46% year over year, and SGC in the TCG space is actually up 2%. Now, they are down 21% year over year, but overall, not a great grading month for any of the brands, just in total as a whole. Overall grading volume was down significantly, and the TCG space didn't do much better. So that's how everything looks at the high level. Now we're going to get to dig into the individual cards and sets and all of that fun stuff for PSA to kind of figure out, even if they're not grading at high volumes, what are people having graded? And I love this segment of this video. I think there's a lot of takeaways and a lot of learning. So we always start off with the most graded sets, and there's some really cool lessons, I think, in this one. So English and Japanese 151 have been at the top really for the last year. Japanese 151, I went back to this video that I did a year ago, and guess what? 1 year ago, Japanese 151 made its debut on this list in this video, and it came in at number 2. Ever since then, for the last 11 months, Japanese 151 has been 1 or 2. The only time it's flipped down to number 2 is when Pokemon or Scarlet and Violet 151 came out in the English variant, and it took the 1 spot for a while. Now, that doesn't mean a whole lot, but to me, for the last year, to have these same sets at the very top, it just tells me that there hasn't been any other set with that much pizzazz, that much demand, that much interest around it, which isn't a good thing. You know, hopefully we're going to get some of these Scarlet and Violet sets. Hopefully Surging Sparks is going to bring a lot to the hobby. Hopefully that Team Rocket set further down the road is going to get everybody excited, right? We know that there's going to be a new specialty set launched in January. Hopefully that thing is absolutely hyped. So again, the fact of the matter is 151 is incredibly popular with huge demand, so it's not a bad thing to see it at the very top. And remember, Japanese 151 has the Master Balls, so there's a good reason why there's more of that set being graded than anything else. But still, I want to see something else come up. We get a ton of demand. You see Twilight Masquerade there this month, came in at number 4. You know, that's exciting. Twilight Masquerade is obviously a big set. You got the Greninja in there, you got the Eevee in there, you got some other illustration rare cards that I think are awesome. You got some great trainer cards in there, so it's nice to see Twilight Masquerade coming in at number 4. The old school, the OG of them all, the 1999 Pokemon game coming in at number 3. It's not uncommon to see that up here. Crown Zenith is up here coming in at number 5, right? One of the last set of the Sword and Shield era. A lot of people love that. Another set with just a really deep lineup. Lots of awesome cards that people would be very excited to get graded. You know what else is really cool? One Piece is on here. What gets lost in this video sometimes, because it's almost always exclusively Pokemon, is these are TCG numbers. These aren't just Pokemon numbers. This includes One Piece and Magic and Lorcana and all of the other TCG categories or variants are in here as well. But because Pokemon is the most popular by far, it's dominated by Pokemon cards. But it's really exciting to see One Piece Japanese Emperors of the New World up there. I just love it when other TCGs make a list. The other thing that's really cool is you see Paldean Fates on here. Okay, Paldean Fates is a set we've talked about a lot on this channel. And Evolving Skies, still making the list. Evolving Skies, obviously the big set from Sword and Shield with the biggest card from the Sword and Shield era. Not surprised to see it on here. Still excited to see it's getting a lot of gains. But again, if you look on the far right, the growth versus August 2024, all of those red numbers, I mean, even though these are the 10 most graded sets in the TCG space at PSA, still big drops month over month, right? 33, 38, 29, 27. The most, or the smallest drop of them all was the 1999 Pokemon game, only coming down 19%. So the list hasn't changed that much, but the drops, pretty much significant. So the very next one we're going to look at right here is the most graded cards. Now we have Pikachu with Greyfeld hat at the very top, and I just feel like it's never going to disappear. I feel like it is just going to live at the top of the most graded card list forever. It has been number 1 for 10 months in a row, and again, I want to see something else come and displace that card. Like, I get it, it's awesome. I get it, it was probably printed into oblivion, hence why we've already seen 55,700 copies of that card graded, but something has to come out with even more excitement. Now you'll see the number 2 card is that 151 Charizard, right? So we've seen that card be graded quite a bit too. 21,000 copies of that card have been graded. And then you got Twilight Masquerade Eevee, that's been on here a couple months in a row. You know, I like the fact that the Shrouded Fable wood art promos are on here, right? Like, I really love those cards. I wish they would have found a way to put them in the Shrouded Fable set to give the set itself a little more excitement, a little more long-term collectability, but they didn't. They pulled them out. They're promos. The artwork is absolutely fire. I think that Greninja card is going to do really, really well in the long run. So it's interesting to see both of those cards making the list. And then Paldean Fates, like I said on the last slide, right? We saw the Paldean Fates was one of the most graded sets. Both of the chase cards, the Charizard and the Bubble Mew, make this list. So there's some really, really awesome cards on this list, but I do want to continue to see it rotate out. I want to see something displace that Pikachu with gray felt hat at the very top. 55,700 of that card have been great. That is an insane number. We don't see that number. I mean, look at it. You have the 1999 Pokemon game Charizard on there. 65,000 of that have been graded. I mean, it is just crazy how many of those Pikachu with gray felt hat cards have been graded. Now, the other thing that I thought would be interesting is the number of Japanese cards and Japanese sets are really starting to die off on this list. Now, the market rotates. Sometimes English is in favor, sometimes Japanese is in favor. We've seen that over the course of the couple years where we've been doing this video series here on this channel, but we used to see this primarily dominated by Japanese cards, and now there's only 2 Japanese cards on here. There was only 2 Japanese sets on the previous slide, so Japanese is starting to rotate out. You can get awesome cards at great discounts compared to some of the English variants. The art is awesome, the texture is awesome, the depth of the cards is awesome, but in terms of grading and in terms of all of that, it is certainly falling by the wayside to English, which the English cards do command a little bit more of a premium on the secondary market from a price perspective. Now, next slide right here. This is my own creation, and I started this a while ago, and you can see back in January, February, I mean, we're talking a couple years ago at this point, I had this crazy dream, and I said, okay, one of the reasons I'm so bullish on Pokemon in the long run is I think the overall grading activity, I think the overall hobby, the overall card collecting space is going to rotate towards TCG. I think TCG is going to overtake what I call the ball sports segment in time, which by ball sports, I mean baseball, basketball, football, right? Those are the 3 big sports out there right now. And for the longest time, look at the orange line represents ball sports, the blue line represents TCG cards, and for the longest time, it was a knockdown, drag-out fight. I mean, they were going back and forth. Sometimes TCG had more grading volume, sometimes ball sports had more grading volume. Like, it really was close for the longest time, and I was feeling really good about myself. I was like, hey, I called it. TCG is going to overtake ball sports. Like, huzzah, PikiPikaPapa is right. However, for all of 2024, for whatever reason, weaker sets, weaker cards, not as much demand, whatever you want to say, ball sports has absolutely crushed TCG in terms of grading volume. Now, when you look at what's happened over the last 2 months, last month in August, we saw TCG take a big chunk out of the lead that ball sports had built, right? You see that big spike up in the blue, and you see the orange kind of remain flat. Now, both came down. The thing that I like about September, if you have one good takeaway, or if I have one good takeaway from this information, it's that both ball sports and TCG dropped in September. So it wasn't solidified. It wasn't only concentrated a weak grading month in TCG space, right? Both TCG and ball sports had a very, very soft grading month. And you can see the graph on the right there. You see TCG was down 26% month over month. Baseball was down 16%. Football was down 6%. Basketball was down 4%. You know, football is just kind of getting fired up. So I'm sure a lot of people are sending cards in and getting them graded now as their favorite players take the field again. Baseball's getting in the playoffs. Typically with baseball around the playoff season, you know, you start to see players who get hot in the playoffs. Like, a lot of people buy their cards, get them graded because they think they're going to win the World Series. There'll be a lot of upside there. You know, basketball is kind of on a downward trend, but the basketball season kind of is in a different space right now. So lots of reasons why we're seeing this, but I was excited to see at least last month we saw TCG take a big chunk out of ball sports, and this month they at least moved in the same direction. So that's a good takeaway out of all of this. Now, the next thing we look at right here are the most graded subjects, and you know, this doesn't really change that much, but what is a biggest takeaway for me, remember, we looked at the most graded sets. We looked at month over month, all of that red, right? All of those were down 20, 27, 29, 30, 38%, right? Look at these individual subjects. Look at Charizard. Charizard actually had 16% more cards graded versus last month. That's good. Pikachu, the same thing. Now Mew is down 26%. You see Monkey from One Piece making a big jump right there. Then you see Mewtwo is up, Blastoise is up, Eevee is down, Umbreon down, Venusaur is up. But the reason I thought this was such a cool takeaway is because we talk about this a lot on the channel. If you buy super quality, high-end cards of these big name Pokemon, you are going to do okay in the long run. It won't always gain in value. There's going to be ups, there's going to be downs, but seeing this type of strong grading volume for a lot of these big names, it just goes to show you that even though overall TCG grading was down, the big names still did well. There was still a lot of people getting them graded, still a lot of interest in it. So that's a big takeaway from me. And You know, it's interesting to see Umbreon drop down in terms of grading volume. We'll just have to see how that trends long term. I think the Eevee's getting driven a whole lot right now by that Twilight Masquerade card, so maybe over time those are going to get submitted, and as the population starts to inflate, maybe people won't be sending quite as many through. But really, really interesting to see this, and I love keeping a look at this. Listen, there was a while there where my man Pikachu was #1, but ever since Pikachu lost it again to Charizard, Charizard's been #1, I don't know, for like 6 or 7 months right now, so I don't know if Pikachu's ever going to catch up, but the Fire Lizard reigns supreme atop of this list. The next one right here, and again, I always say take it with a huge grain of salt, this is gem rate by era for the different grading companies. So you can see it's broken down between sports and TCG. So you can see it, Pokemon, or let's say this, how about this? PSA TCG cards in the 2020, so 2020, 21, 22, 23, 24, all of those eras have a 68.6% gem rate. So out of all of the cards from those years in the TCG space that was sent to PSA, 68.6% of them came back in a Gem Mint 10 holder, right? Beckett is even higher because people are traditionally black label chasing. So from those same years, those TCG cards that were sent to Beckett, 84.2% of them came back with a Gem Mint grade. And again, people are black label chasing, so they send the best of the best. So that makes a lot of sense. SGC, only 46.5% last month ended up in a 10 holder, in a Gem Mint holder. So that's interesting. And then CGC, same thing, only 51.7%. Now, in July, we saw these numbers materially increase versus what we had seen in previous months. July was when we saw the big spike. In August, we saw it hold the line. And guess what? In September, it held the line. So really, these gem rates have been almost the same for the last 3 months. Now, why do we expect that? That's because obviously the print quality of these newer Scarlet and Violet sets have improved significantly. So we've seen the TCG gem rates remain pretty consistent over the last couple months. And again, that's simply because the print rates, or the print quality, is much better than it was earlier in Scarlet and Violet era. Now, next one right here. Okay, so this is TCG cards graded at PSA by month going all the way back to January of 2022. And what I like to do is I like to look at month-over-month comparisons. This lets me know what has happened in the past, how is it happening in the present, and what could I possibly expect in the future. And as you can see, this is August to September 2022, 2023, and 2024. I have those in those giant red boxes. And you can see in 2022, it was directionally flat. August to September was flat. Now, August to September of 2023, as I said, in July, they had launched that new grading center over in Japan, so I'm sure they were working through a backlog, so those numbers are really high. In August to September, saw a pretty big increase, so you got to kind of, those numbers are muddy, right? You got to take it with a grain of salt. But then August to September of 2024, that is a huge drop off. That is not muddy data. That is just a big drop off in grading volume. And matter of fact, if you look at the blue line over the last year, if you go back to January of 2024, it's all the way up at like 568,000 TCG cards were graded. As I said earlier in this video, it has just been a steady decline all the way down. And as I said, you know, there's a bunch of different reasons for that. One would imagine that, hey, you know, Sword and Shield alt arts, I don't think there's a ton of them that are being sent through right now. Scarlet and Violet, we're still waiting for our big Scarlet and Violet sets to come out. I mean, there have been some big cards in Scarlet and Violet, the Magikarp, but again, think about those earlier sets with those really low gem rates. When the gem rates are really low, not a lot of people are sending things through. Like if your card isn't eligible to hit a PSA 10, if you don't think it's going to get a PSA 10, why would you send it through in the first place? So I think PSA and the overall grading volume for the TCG space for the whole year has been really affected by those lower quality cards that were produced at the beginning of the Scarlet and Violet, all the way up to 151. 151 still has really low gem rates, so don't forget about that. We're just finally starting to see better gem rates. So it'll be interesting to see if we recover, and especially since we have some bigger sets coming out. I'm hoping it does. I'm hoping that this is just a blip on the radar. And again, more grading isn't a good thing, but it is an indication that the hobby is excited about these things and they think that there's some long-term value to be stored or some short-term value to be made from getting a raw card into a Gem Mint 10 holder. Now, the final thing we look at every month when we do this is just the overall grading volume. Like this is it. This is PSA's overall grading volume. Again, this goes all the way back to May of 2021. And, you know, it's been directionally flat for all of 2024. You can look at those bar graphs right there, and it's been good. You see these huge spikes like we saw in the earlier graph, but it's been interesting. And I would still say it was a big month for TCG grading volume, right? It hasn't been the best month, but comparatively to the 3 months prior to August, it was a big month. And I'm going to stay positive. I'm going to keep saying, listen, last month was a big month. Even though this was down, we were down off of that incredibly high blue spike that you saw on the last slide. So even though we're way down off that that crazy high spike anomaly, I'm still going to say it was a solid month for grading in the TCG space. I also think that there's a lot of excitement to be had in the future. And when you think about it as a whole, remember those big spikes and big drops that we saw, guess what? 3 of the last 6 months, PSA has broken the overall grading record there at PSA. So big takeaways, big wins, lots of excitement in the card space. And remember, we want all card spaces to do well. As far as I'm concerned, I want baseball, basketball, football, Pokemon, One Piece, Yu-Gi-Oh, you name it. I want all of them to be collectible because it just shows that cards as an alternative investment is a very safe, very fun way to store value, hopefully for long-term price appreciation. And that, at the end of the day, that's what I'm hoping for. I love the cards while I have them. I love the fact that I have something that I can quote unquote invest in and enjoy while along the way. I don't really enjoy any of the stocks that I invest in. I can't touch them, I can't feel them, I can't see them. It's just a number on a computer screen. So Pokemon, in my mind, has a whole lot of upside. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have questions about it, drop it down below. If you thought it was cool, give us a thumbs up. And if you want more data-driven content, we do it all the time, hit that subscribe button. I hope you have an awesome one. I appreciate you more than I can say. I'll talk to you later, everybody. Bye.